The calabash was cracked along its rim, a jagged seam that made it useless for measuring grain. For years it had sat in the corner of Abena's family compound, ignored by everyone but her. To most it was just a broken shell of what once balanced millet and shea nuts. To Abena it was alive, a vessel that carried more than food. Hidden beneath its weave of straw and hardened skin was a pocket she had discovered by accident, one that could hold scraps of paper, folded tightly, words pressed against their own silence. The first time she used it was on a day so hot that the air shimmered above the dust road. Kojo had gone with his grandmother to the market, pushing a rickety cart stacked with vegetables. They had grown up together, and though the village teased them like siblings, she knew something between them had shifted. His glance lingered longer than it should, his smile hovered just a breath longer than politeness demanded. She wrote him a note, trembling as she formed the words, then slipped it through the seam. By evening, when the market tide returned, a folded reply lay in its hollow. Their ritual began there, secret letters that passed like currents between them. While her father counted cowries and her mother sorted shea nuts, Abena's heart raced for the sound of Kojo's footsteps and the soft clearing of his throat, their signal. He always signed his letters with a simple drawing of two joined leaves, their childhood emblem carved once into a mango trunk. She would press the paper to her lips before hiding it back beneath the broken rim, whispering her gratitude to the calabash for keeping their secret. Market day was the rhythm of the village, a tide of colors and sounds that swallowed dawn and spit out dusk. Women balanced baskets of beans, salt, and dried fish on their heads. Goats bleated from rope tethers, children darted through the stalls, and the Niger shimmered at the edge of it all like a sheet of beaten bronze. Amid this chaos, Abena moved with the precision of someone who had a hidden purpose. Her hands were quick with bargaining, but her eyes searched for Kojo. He worked at his grandmother's stall, arranging tomatoes with an earnestness that made her heart soften. Sometimes their fingers brushed when she handed him a coin for a single pepper, the contact lingering just long enough to quicken her pulse. Beneath the stall, hidden under a loose wooden plank, he would slip her replies. She would later fold them into the calabash at home, adding them to their growing archive of hope. The calabash was no longer broken in her eyes. It was whole because it carried their future. Their words were not frivolous. Kojo wrote about saving coins from every market day, about learning carpentry from an uncle in town, about his dream to one day stand before her father with enough to be respected. She wrote back about her longing, her fears, her dreams of teaching one day. Sometimes she teased him, sometimes she dared to hint at desire, a line about the way she imagined his hand against hers under the neem tree, or the way her breath caught when he smiled. These letters were their stolen touches, their private caresses in ink. And the calabash guarded them like a loyal friend. But dreams rarely remain untouched. One evening, as Abena returned from the market, she found her father in serious conversation with a man at the gate. Yah, the son of a wealthy trader, stood tall in a freshly pressed bubu the color of desert sand. His sandals were sturdy, his voice measured, his eyes steady but impersonal when they flicked across her. He spoke little. It was his father's reputation and wealth that spoke for him. Cows, bags of rice, cloth from the coast. These were the words that swayed elders. Abena's stomach clenched as she poured water for them, her hands trembling. She thought of Kojo's letters tucked inside the calabash, words about saving coin by coin, about working toward a future built with sweat. How small those words might seem next to caravans of grain. Her father stroked his beard thoughtfully, saying Yo was a serious man, the kind who could steady a family during drought. Steady. The word felt heavy in her chest. Was love meant to be steady like an unchanging well or alive like the river that overflowed with rain? That night she went to the calabash with trembling hands. By the light of a flickering oil lamp she wrote to Kojo, "A man has come." My father listened. They speak of camels, rice and security. I do not know what I will be asked to do. She pressed the words hard into the page as if weight might anchor them against the tide threatening to pull her away. She folded it and slid it into the calabash's hollow belly. Resting her forehead against its cracked rim, she whispered, "Keep this for us. Keep him close." The calabash did not answer, but she swore its silence held her secret tighter than any lock. That night, sleep evaded Abena. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the neem leaves outside felt amplified by her racing heart. She lay on her raffia mat, eyes wide, listening to her father's steady breathing in the next room. The conversation replayed endlessly. Ya's measured answers, her father's approving nods, her mother's silence that carried both resignation and calculation. In their world, marriage was rarely about love. It was about survival, about what gifts could keep hunger away during dry seasons. At dawn, Abena rose before the rooster crowed. She moved quietly to the calabash, her sanctuary. Her fingers caressed its cracked rim, as though it were skin that might warm under her touch. She whispered, "Keep me safe," and waited, knowing Kojo would come. Sure enough, by mid-morning, the secret rhythm of footsteps reached her ears. He had slipped away from his chores, eyes darting to ensure no one followed. He pulled a folded page from his pocket, the paper worn and smudged from his calloused hands. The note was short, but every word throbbed with urgency. "I hear what you say. I will not let them take you without a fight. My hands are not full like yours, but they are mine and they are strong. Tell me what to do, Abena, and I will stand before your father. I cannot lose you." She pressed the paper to her lips, her chest rising and falling with the sharp ache of longing. The room seemed too small for her emotions. She wanted to run into the fields, to cry out her love to the sky, to let the whole village know. Instead, she tucked the note deep inside the calabash, where it would breathe alongside her secret fears. 2 days later, Abena slipped away under the guise of fetching herbs for her mother. She hurried to the edge of the millet fields, where the old neem tree spread its arms wide like an elder keeping watch. Kojo was already there, leaning against the rough trunk, his face shadowed but lit with determination. When their eyes met, words were unnecessary. The air between them was thick with unspoken promises. He stepped closer, so close she could feel the warmth of his body, though they dared not touch. "I'll save faster," he whispered, his voice raw. "I'll take more shifts at my uncle's workshop. If your father sees I can provide, he might." His words faltered under the weight of their impossibility. They both knew Ya's wealth outstripped anything Kojo could gather in months, maybe years. Abena reached out, her hand hovering inches from his chest, trembling with the desire to close the space. The scent of sawdust and earth clung to him, familiar and grounding. "Kojo," she whispered, "sometimes I feel I am not mine to give. They speak of me as though I am grain to be measured, cloth to be traded." Her voice broke. His hand twitched, almost rising to cover hers, but he stopped, clenched his fist, and pressed it against the bark of the tree instead. Their restraint only heightened the tension. Their breaths mingled, shallow, urgent. She could almost feel his lips near hers, a forbidden nearness that seared her skin. For a suspended heartbeat, they were bound in a silence louder than any confession. Then a goat bleated nearby, startling them back into caution. She pulled away, her cheeks flushed, her pulse hammering. He straightened, jaw tight, eyes burning with words he dared not speak. "The neem knows our secret now," he said softly, "and it will hold it until we are free." By the time Abena returned home, her father was already preparing for another meeting with Ya's family. This time, gifts accompanied them. Bolts of cloth dyed in rich blues and reds, sacks of rice stacked neatly by the doorway, and 2 goats tethered as proof of wealth. The courtyard buzzed with the murmurs of neighbors drawn by the spectacle. To them it was not only a proposal, it was a sign of prosperity, a promise that their community would be steadied through Ya's generosity. Abena's heart sank as her father beamed, his hand lingering on the cloth as though it were already stitched into her future. Her mother, ever silent, watched her daughter closely. There was something unreadable in her gaze, pity perhaps, or resignation carved by years of her own compromises. Abena clenched her fists beneath her wrapper, fighting the urge to scream. She thought of Kojo, of his rough hands smoothing a doorframe, of his laughter echoing across the river. Against Ya's offerings, what weight could such memories carry? That night, Abena sat by the calabash, the oil lamp's flame flickering. She wrote with trembling fingers, "They brought gifts today." My father's eyes glowed like embers. "Kojo, I am drowning. Tell me there is a way to swim against this tide." She pressed the paper flat, slid it into the calabash's hollow, and rested her cheek against its cool surface. In the silence, she imagined Kojo's hands cupping hers, his breath warm against her ear, whispering the promise she needed to hear, "I will not let them take you." The rains had been late that year. The air hung heavy, restless, the sky stained a pale gray that promised water but held it back like a miser guarding coins. Farmers grumbled in the market, scanning the horizon with weary eyes. It was during this tense season that you returned, not with cloth or goats this time, but with the promise of repairing the community well, a gesture that made him shine brighter in the elder's eyes. Abena felt her throat tighten each time his name was spoken. She carried his image with dread, tall, polished, steady, like a pillar built to support but not to warm. Yet it was Kojo's face that lived in her heart, sweat along his brow as he worked wood into smooth shapes, his laughter when a goat disrupted their errands, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her as though she were a secret worth guarding. That night she wrote to him again. Her pen scratched furiously, "They are calling him a savior now, Kojo. He brings water where there is none. How can I, the daughter of this house, speak against such a gift? Still I feel my pulse only for you. If I must drown, let it be in your arms." She folded the page, slid it into the calabash and pressed her lips against its rim. Outside, the first thunder rolled across the sky. 2 days later the storm broke. The heavens opened with a vengeance, pouring sheets of water that turned dust to rivers and alleys to torrents. The market scattered in chaos, women clutching their wares, children shrieking with delight and fear, goats scrambling under shelter. The Niger swelled, its banks licking higher with every hour. Abena rushed to the calabash, heart pounding. Rain leaked into the compound, trickling in thin streams across the earth. She knelt beside the vessel, shielding it with her wrapper, but water seeped through the cracks, softening the papers inside. She gasped, pulling them out in trembling handfuls, her love letters to Kojo blurring as ink dissolved into tears. Just then the compound gate banged open, and Kojo himself stumbled in, drenched, eyes wide with urgency. Without hesitation, he knelt beside her, his hands covering hers as they fought to salvage the letters. Their skin touched, hot against cold, sparks crackling even as water soaked them through. The storm roared above, but for a heartbeat they were cocooned, his breath against her cheek, her fingers entwined with his. He whispered hoarsely, "Let the storm take everything but not you." Their faces hovered close, lips trembling toward one another. And then, the calabash slipped, spilling its soaked contents into the flood rushing through the courtyard. Neighbors shouted, pointing. The secret had been torn from the shadows and cast into the open. By morning the rain had eased, but the damage was done. Letters plastered against mud walls, ink smeared but still legible, had been gathered by curious hands. Elders frowned over words of longing, neighbors whispered of impropriety, and Abena's father sat silent, the bundle of damp paper heavy in his lap. His silence was worse than anger. Abena stood before him, trembling, Kojo by her side. She could feel his warmth, the trembling steadiness in his posture, but neither of them dared speak first. Finally her father said, "You turned a broken vessel into a place for shame. Is this what you call love? Is this what will steady a family through drought?" His words landed like stones. Kojo stepped forward, voice low but firm. "I will not deny it. I wrote them. I love her. I may not have caravans, but I have hands that work, coins saved little by little, and a heart that will not break under weight. Give me time. Let me prove it." His boldness drew gasps, but Abena felt pride surge in her chest. She reached for his hand, openly now, fingers entwining with his before all who watched. Their touch was not just love, it was defiance, it was a plea, it was a vow whispered into the eyes of a village that judged them. Her father's eyes narrowed, torn between rage, tradition, and the undeniable courage standing before him. The calabash lay empty at their feet, its hollow accusing, its crack wider than before. Yet even broken, it had carried them here, to a truth no storm could wash away. The calabash was gone. Abena discovered it at dawn, when the compound was still draped in silence. She rushed to the corner where it always sat, only to find an empty space. Panic clawed at her chest until she saw her father carrying it into the shed, his face set like stone. He did not break it, did not burn it. He simply removed it as though to deny her the comfort of its hollow. "Your secrets are not secrets anymore," he said, voice rough with restraint. "You think love can keep a family alive when the sky withholds rain? You think words, scribbled in childish longing, can fill our granary?" His tone was not cruel, but it was heavy, the kind of weight that made her knees weaken. She wanted to cry out that her love for Kojo was no child's play, that it was stronger than grain and cloth, that it was a force that beat in her chest with every breath. But the words tangled in her throat, strangled by fear and shame. Kojo came that evening, but her father refused him entry. He stood at the gate, drenched in sweat, calling her name softly like a prayer. She wanted to run to him, to press her face against his chest and breathe him in. Instead she sat inside, her hands pressed to her ears, her tears hot as fire. For the first time she felt the crushing power of walls, not the clay and wood around her, but the walls of custom and expectation that towered higher than any fence. Days turned into a blur of silence. Kojo's footsteps no longer came to the gate, his notes no longer found their way beneath the plank at the market stall. Abena's hands itched for paper, for ink, for the solace of writing, but the calabash was locked away, and without it, words felt unsafe. She carried them in her chest, unsent letters that burned like embers. Her mother noticed her restlessness. "You are walking like a shadow," she murmured one evening while they shelled groundnuts together. Rest. "You will make yourself ill." Abena wanted to scream, to confess everything, to beg for her mother's protection. Instead, she forced a smile that fooled no one. That night, she lay awake, tracing the memory of Kojo's hand brushing hers, the heat that lingered long after. Desire and sorrow braided together inside her, pulling her taut like the string of a kora. At the market she caught glimpses of him. Their eyes met across the stalls, hungry, aching, but neither dared to move closer. A single step would ignite a fire the whole village would see. Instead, they let their gazes linger, letting longing speak where mouths were gagged. Sometimes in the quiet hours before dawn, she imagined him beside her, the warmth of his arm around her waist, his breath tickling her ear. She would drift into sleep wrapped in that fantasy, only to wake to the cold space of absence. It was her mother who broke the silence. One evening, when the harmattan winds had begun to whisper dust across the compound, she called Abena into her room. She lifted the mat and pulled out a small tin box, dented and rusted from age. Inside lay faded cloth, a string of beads, and a folded letter so fragile it might crumble with touch. "My mother loved a singer," she said quietly, smoothing the beads. "But she married a merchant. The merchant gave her food when the wells dried, cloth when the rains failed. She raised us well. Yet she never stopped humming the singer's songs in the quiet of the night." Her eyes met Abena's, soft with sorrow and strength. "Do you understand?" Abena swallowed hard, her throat thick. "Which life did she choose? Which life do you wish for me?" Her mother sighed. "The tent if it could one day become a house. The house if it could still hold music. The desert teaches us this: anything too rigid breaks. Anything too loose blows away." She pressed the beads into Abena's palm, closing her fingers around them. "Ask for time. Not to run away but to listen." The words pierced Abena's heart like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For the first time in weeks she felt a thread of hope. Not freedom yet, not victory, but time. Time to prove that her love was not just song but also shelter. Abena stood before the elders at the well, her mother's beads clenched tight in her hand. The courtyard was crowded, neighbors whispering, children clinging to their mother's wrappers. Ya's family had gathered, their wealth on quiet display, goats tethered, sacks of grain stacked like walls. Kojo lingered at the edge, shoulders squared, eyes burning with unspoken resolve. When her father demanded silence, Abena's voice broke through, steady despite the pounding of her heart. "Grant me 40 days, she said. "Let me serve the village with my hands. Let me learn the midwife's craft, help repair the well, and show that I am not only a mouth to be fed. After that, decide my fate. Give me that time." There was murmuring. Ya tilted his head, thoughtful. He stepped forward, surprising everyone with his calm reply. "A good wife should know water," he said evenly. "If 40 days is what she asks, I will not refuse. But let those days prove her worth." His tone carried no malice, only dignity. The elders nodded, pleased with his composure. Abena's father frowned, but he did not object. The clock had begun, each day now a coin she must spend wisely. The days bled into weeks. Abena rose before dawn, grinding herbs, tending the sick, carrying water until her shoulders ached. She sat with the midwife during births, her hands trembling the first time she caught a child, her eyes filling with tears at its first cry. In the afternoons she helped repair the well, hauling stones, mixing mud, her skin blistered but her spirit unbroken. Kojo was never far. He worked double shifts in his uncle's carpentry shed, saving coin until his palms bled. He brought timbers to reinforce the well's frame, his hands guiding hers as they lifted beams together. Sometimes, when no one watched, his fingers lingered on hers, a fleeting caress that made her knees weaken. At night, when exhaustion claimed her, she dreamed of him beside her, whispering promises against her skin, his breath hot and steady. Desire grew sharp in those hidden moments, stolen touches, gazes that burned longer than fire, words that quivered with yearning. Yatu watched. He brought his widowed sister to buy herbs, praised Abena's skill, even overpaid without boast. He was kind, steady, reliable. She found herself respecting him, though her pulse never quickened in his presence. It was Kojo who unraveled her, who left her trembling after a shared glance, who made the air itself ache with possibility. Every day she prayed the elders would see what her heart already knew, that love itself was worth more than steady riches. The 40th day dawned under a washed-out sky, the scent of wet earth lingering after a night of rain. The courtyard filled once again, neighbors gathered to witness the decision. Ya stood tall, his uncles beside him, while Kojo arrived with his workshop master and 2 elders from the city, men of respect who vouched for his character. He carried a small chest filled with tools, savings wrapped in cloth, and a signed lease for a corner of the market where he would open his own stall. The master spoke. A man is not only what he promises, but what others say he has kept. Kojo has kept every vow I have seen. Then to everyone's astonishment Ya stepped forward. His voice was calm, almost tender. I withdraw, he said. Not because I cannot give, but because gifts should be chosen as well as offered. May this family prosper even if not with my name. His words fell like blessings and for the first time Abena's father's eyes softened. That evening the calabash was brought out of the shed. Its rim had been mended with twine, its hollow cleaned of storm debris. It was filled with water for the first time in years, and as the elders poured it out in blessing the crowd cheered. Abena stood beneath the neem tree, Kojo's hand warm in hers, their fingers twined openly. She looked at the calabash, its crack now a scar of survival, and felt tears rise. It had carried their secrets, borne their shame, and now it held their future. When Kojo leaned close, his lips brushed her temple, tender and trembling. The village saw, but this time no one turned away. The calabash had been restored and so had their love.